Hi, Sam Roberts here for Roberts Geospatial. Today I want to give you a little tutorial in how to use the raster source. So in ProRaster Scientific and all versions of ProRaster, when you interact with a raster, you don't actually select the raster file itself, you select a raster source which contains that file. So for example, if I go to a color component here, I have to choose a raster source to connect to that color component. If I drop down this list, I get a list of the raster sources that I've created. I can also browse to a raster and select some raster. When I do, it's going to create a raster source behind the scenes. So what are these things that are raster sources? You can see here we have some XML here for an algorithm. So here's a layer, and in the layer we have a component, and in the component it says the raster is ocean. So that's the name of the raster source, and if we go back up here to the global section, you'll find a raster source that has a name called ocean, and in it there's the file name of the raster that's actually being rendered through that raster source. So you can create and edit your own raster sources through the raster source editor. Let's take a look at that. Here's the raster source editor. Why would you create your own raster sources? There are three reasons. Firstly, for convenience. So for example, here's the Merit DEM raster source. I use it all the time. I use it for rendering, and I also use it for processing. And when you're using the processing operations, you'll find that you're interacting with raster sources there as well as rasters. So it can be convenient. Secondly, there are some circumstances, usually with TIFF files, where you want to change the way that the raster engine mounts the TIFF file, and that's accessed via this advanced button which gives you access to driver preferences, and there are all sorts of advanced options here which you can change to change the way that a raster is loaded. It's not something you'll use frequently, but for example in the multispectral Earth observation imagery in ProRaster Scientific, we use those options all the time to load the TIFF files and the JPEG 2000 files that the imagery is shipped in. So that's the second reason. The third reason is that a raster source can contain multiple rasters, and I just want to give you a little example of how to do that. So let me go to my data directory. I've downloaded some data from Copernicus from the European Space Agency. It's a GLOW30 global DEM, and it gets shipped as tar files. When you unzip those tar files, you'll get a directory, and then within that directory there's subdirectories, and in one of those subdirectories you'll find a TIFF file which is actually the digital elevation data. You'll find other TIFF files which are various things like masks and so forth. And so it's quite a sort of verbose folder structure, and picking out all the TIFF files that you want from that is kind of tricky. But you can do it with a raster source. So let's go back to our raster source editor. And okay, so I'm going to add a raster source. I'm going to call it GLOW30 Switzerland DEM. Hit this button and that will add the raster source. You must have a unique name for your raster sources, and if you don't make it unique, this tick will be across. Now I want to get all the TIFF files from all of the directories that are in this Switzerland directory. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to create a path or a file. So I'm going to select star.tiff, and then I'm going to add a folder. So I browse to Switzerland. So this is the folder which contains all of those subfolders, which has got all the DM data in it. So select that folder. So now we've added one path to our raster source directory, and it's picked up all of the TIFF files that are in that path or in that folder or in any subfolder. And you can see that we've grabbed all these squillions of TIFF files. Now I don't want all of these other ones like the WBM TIFF, which is the water mask. I just want these DEM TIFFs. So here's a little trick. Come over to this section here where we'll select this path or file and it'll be mirrored over here. And then you can edit this. So I actually want *dem.tiff. Now hit this button and you can see that the list updates. And now we're only picking out the DEM files. You can click through them and see what they are. And we have the files that we want. Hit OK. And it will display that raster source. Now in this case, we have multiple files inside one raster source. So I only need one layer to display all of those files, which makes it convenient. And that's largely designed for imagery. So with imagery, it gets rendered as RGB. There's no intervention in the color space or anything, and so you don't need to do anything different from one raster to the next. In this case, we've got continuous data, it's DEM data. So each tile, each file in that raster source gets rendered separately, and you can see that ends up looking a bit sort of odd. So to change that, you need to come into your intensity settings. Firstly, to make all of the sun shadow the same sort of scale, you need to override the scale factor. And then on the color page, you need to create a color transform that is the same for each one of these tiles. And for example, you go to a system color map and choose our system Atlas color transform, and there you go. So there's Switzerland rendered as Glow 30 data. We add on some Google Maps perhaps, and now you can see Switzerland and so forth overlaid. So that's how you can use the raster source editor to go to this one. The raster source editor to add in files from complicated folder structures. And in here we've only added one path or file. You can actually add multiple paths and files in here and do multiple searches for different types of things. So it's very flexible, and you can use it to grab data from all over the place. Also, this mechanism can be used to drill into zip files. So when you have rasters stored in zip files, you don't always have to unzip them, depending on the format of the raster. If it's something like an ArcASCII format, for example, they're often zipped because they're very inefficient. You can actually just read them straight out of the zip, and that's something that you can set up in the raster source editor. So thanks for watching.